This video is brought to you by Skillshare, the world's largest online learning community for creatives. And I know you're a creative because you're here. Time loops involve all sorts of twists, and if you're sensitive to spoilers, this video is going to talk about Undertale, Doki Doki Literature Club, Getaway, The Map of Tiny Perfect Things, Palm Springs, and Black Mirror's White Bear. Near the beginning of the game Undertale, you come across a mirror and get a single line of text. "It's you," it reads, with a happy little exclamation mark. And soon enough, you decide to venture out into the world, begin your quest, only for the kind, motherly Toriel to try and stop you. "It's dangerous," she warns. And what do? You decide to fight on, to push past her, because that's what you do in games. Only to watch with horror as you murder this woman who has been so kind to you. At least that was my experience, the reflexive response of many gamers, and just as game designer Toby Fox intended, I rebooted my game, reloaded my save, because I didn't want me murdering Toriel to be part of my playthrough. I didn't want my story to be tainted by that decision. And if I reloaded, then I hadn't really done it, right? That version of me would be gone and I would find another way past. Only to realize my horror when I saw the game remembered what I had done. Or specifically, one character remembered, Flowey. None of the rest of the world does, not even Toriel. No, they're stuck in a time loop under your control. Only Flowey knows what you did in your previous loops, every save and reload, living through the same moment or hour or day again and again, sometimes just for the fun of it. And maybe, in those loops, you murdered people. Maybe you just hurt their feelings to see if it unlocked another area of the game, for fun. Time loops for them as many times as you decide it will. And even more so, let's say you start the game again because you want a perfect run. But no. Flowey remembers what you did last time in a different game file too, on a different loop that you thought would be entirely disconnected. Everything you have done in any loop, any iteration of this timeline, he will taunt you. And then, right at the end of the story, at the end of the game, you come across another mirror, and you get one more line of text. Despite everything, it reads, "It's still you." No happy exclamation mark anymore. It's easy to do the good thing when you're getting rewarded for it. It's easy to resist evil when everyone's watching you. But when you have every opportunity to do the bad thing, every reason to, and no reason to do the good thing, and nobody would even know anyway, then what do you do? And why? So much of good storytelling comes down to these fundamental moments that reveal who we truly are, and the horror of facing that reality. And time loops are a plot device which take that to the extreme, that allow us to see who a character becomes given infinite time and no consequences. Sometimes this is fundamental to the logic of the loop. They have to become a better person in order to escape it. They're in a prison of their own flaws. And while you or I may never be stuck in a time loop that gives us every reason to put off doing the good thing, it does bring us to a deeper question. How do we reckon with ourselves after everything we've done when we thought the world wasn't watching? Time loops give characters this temptation to believe that what they do doesn't really matter, and even more importantly, that what they do isn't really them in some way. Everything will just be erased. Undertale deprives you of that relief. You can play through this timeline, this loop, as many times as you want, but it will always remember. The game gives you every opportunity to reveal who you truly are when you thought nobody was watching, and then it holds up a mirror. Because that's often the ultimate test at the end of these stories, that at the end of the day, despite everything, despite erasing that timeline, you are still the person who, given every opportunity and infinite time, made those mistakes. Maybe you gave into your worst inclinations and the world might forget, but Flowey won't let you forget. When we think of horror, we're often talking about that deep, wrenching fear in the face of a monster, but I'm not sure there is any greater or more intimate horror than feeling yourself give in to your worst inclinations, knowing it's wrong and yet still doing it, and then living with that, knowing it will always be a part of you. So if you're writing a time loop, think about how you can use it to reveal the deepest temptations and desires and fears and wants and needs of your characters. What do they go for given every opportunity? Or at the same time, you might reveal the innate and deep goodness that they had in them that they did not even realize they had given infinite time, and no consequences. And it's because of all of this, the loop can be a brilliant narrative device to drive change, to give your characters every reason to go after what they want rather than what they need, and then give it to them. Reveal it to be hollow, show them it's not what they imagined from a bunch of different angles as they go through the loops, the different ways that they can live out that fantasy. Undertale lets you live out the power fantasy that people often think they want in these games, but in doing so reveals what you really need is meaningful connection with these people. You need empathy. Time loops let you show a character what they want or need from different angles, different outcomes, different loops in a way that linear narratives often don't get to. You can explore any given desire in a really multifaceted way, and so if your characters are going to feel the void of pointless repetition in a time loop, maybe show them the void of what they thought they wanted before you show them what they need. And then how does your character grapple with how despite everything, despite the loop resetting over and over, everything they did, it's still them? How do they internalize that? So much of good character writing isn't about people doing big dramatic things, but about a person's changing understanding of themselves. Especially when they may be the only thing in this world that's changing. Ultimately, we are all going to one day come to a point where we have to decide what we do when nobody is watching. And then we have to decide how to live with that. But this begs another question. When you've done all you could want, possibly need, how do you go on? How do you stop yourself from falling into nihilism? This video is sponsored by Skillshare, which has thousands of classes for any creative skill you could possibly want to learn, like Photoshop, Adobe Illustration, all vital for my job, link down below. Sorry, deja vu. Constant repetition in a time loop story usually starts out as a kind of comedy, the character trying increasingly absurd things to either escape or just for the fun of it, because why not? Learn to skateboard? Why not? Eat 17 tons of ice cream in a day? Sure, go for it.
Blow up a Walmart.
Read every book in the library twice. Clean up the entire town.
Kill your parents.
But victory is temporary, defeat is fleeting, and the horror of being stuck in a time loop begins to sink in. It gets harder to resist doing the bad thing when you're just trying to find something to do. And to truly understand the horror of that, I want to tell you about Doki Doki Literature Club. Which is definitely just an anime girl dating sim. I promise, definitely nothing more than that. Its Steam description even has it classed as anime and cute and psychological hot. Like Flowey, Monica is trapped in a time loop controlled by the player and her coding. She relives the same days at school over and over and over again at your whim, except she remembers when none of the other characters do. They have no free will, not really, just her. Just Monica. She desperately tries to find a way to make you fall in love with her, to find some modicum of change, of happiness, of something real and meaningful in this world she is trapped in, but no matter what she does, whether she's good or kind or mean or cruel, nothing changes for her. The days just keep going through the loop over and over and over every time you boot up the game. And worse, Monica knows she's programmed to fall in love with the player, that she is nothing more than wish fulfillment, that her very existence and desires are going to play out on a loop over and over again at the whim of someone else. She's not even truly free to make her own decisions, that anything she does will ultimately be wiped away when the player just goes outside. She isn't just alone, she doesn't even feel real. Everyone else around her becomes these empty playthings on the set of her life, and when everything is meaningless, everything becomes permissible. The horror of that meaningless looping existence drives her to sadism, to cruelty, to doing anything and everything. It is truly one of the most disturbing games I have ever played, with visuals so disturbing I cannot even show you them on screen because YouTube would take this video down. Probably. I don't actually know, and I'm not taking the risk. The nihilism of the loop, of living the same days, the same story, the same life over and over and over again has set in for Monica like nothing else. She loses her sense of who she is. Time loops will often explore those feelings of despair and nihilism and giving up, and all of that is what makes Getaway by Nicole Cornestas such a fascinating story. Most time loop narratives have an extremely dynamic arc. Either the protagonist is forced to change for the better in order to escape the loop, or the nihilism drives them on a negative arc to become worse, like Monica. But Getaway flips that on its head, stuck in a loop as a getaway driver doomed to die in just 30 minutes, and despite having to watch their companions die over and over and over assuredly every single time, despite the narrative trying to grind down their sense of humanity in just 30 minutes, they refuse to let go of the belief that everyone around them has fundamental value and meaning, even when they're awful to her. Given every reason and infinite time to stop caring, they refuse to give into that nihilism. Despite everything, we see who they truly are, and that's a good thing. So there are two narratives you can play with here, which explore different feelings and experiences. A time loop which forces a character to become better, or a time loop which tries to grind your characters down to see if they can hold on to their core beliefs and what they become when they lose them. And while some time loop stories highlight the demoralizing predictability of the world, Getaway really tries to highlight the infinite capacity of the human spirit to see beauty and wonder and value in the world and others. And that's incredible. With the final lines of the story reading, "One day the sky will change color, right there above you, and you'll be convinced it's your mind finally bowing and breaking under the strain. You'll want to die, really die, and fail to. One day, another lifetime later, you'll realize what you're looking at. The sun, setting. For now, you do what you came here 1,000 lifetimes to do. You drive." Time loops can feel like an abstract sci-fi concept, but if these struggles to find purpose and meaning against monotony and repetition in life feel familiar, it's because they are.
Do you think he's figuring it out?
Not yet.
How many times has it been now?
This video is sponsored by Skillshare, where you can learn any skill you want by clicking the link. Clicking the link. You have to click the link. The Map of Tiny Perfect Things is a short story by Lev Grossman about Mark and Margaret, who find themselves trapped in a daily time loop. And it's a beautiful story about that struggle, but it was actually the author's note at the end which really struck me, where he said, "There's a special melancholy feeling that comes with all good time loop stories. I feel like I make the exact same mistake twice. I feel like I'm always the one who gets stuck emptying the cat litter. I always hit that one damn shot into the net. I get off at the same subway station every single day," and so on. Sometimes we can all feel like we're stuck living the same day on repeat. The same food, the same job, the same burdens, the same mistakes. Trapped in a cycle of ourselves we cannot escape, with all of our energy and enthusiasm wasted on just preparing ourselves to endure the same loop tomorrow. It's relentless. And in that, sometimes we miss the moments of daily magic happening all around us. That's what the story is about, because Mark and Margaret feel that monotony creeping up on them, and so they decide to sit out and find every single moment of beauty, every tiny perfect thing, moments when, just for a few seconds, the dull coal of reality was compressed by random chance into a glittering diamond. And they catalogue them all. They find a girl who makes a huge soap bubble, a cloud that looks exactly like a question mark for a minute, a four-leaf clover field, a cat on a tire swing, a shooting star, even just a boy smiling. The time loop forces both of them to stop and smell the roses, to look past the monotony, to look past the loop, and see the meaning out there in the world that's always there, even if we miss it. Time loops simultaneously give your characters infinite time and incredibly limited time. They can only do so much before the time loop resets. Their life is measured in moments, and it begs the question, what is the value of a moment to your character? And the moment I read this story, I started to see the tiny perfect moments in every time loop story. Getaway admiring the sunset. The last things Dr. Darrell Lloyd ever did in chronological order had him noticing the strange but ordinary beauty and ambiance of the desert he'd never really taken notice of before. The facility he's been working in becoming these magical monoliths to him suddenly. Outer Wild, which is a game all about lingering in the moment, the beauty of everyday things, even knowing the repetition and end is looming over our heads. Yes, a lot of time loop stories are about nihilism, but just as many, if not more, are about the quest for meaning, about finding beauty in everyday moments where we feel stuck in our repetitive lives, because sometimes we do forget the tiny perfect things. We become blind to them, and in that, sometimes need to be reminded. Grossman goes on to write, sometimes those moments of repetition are awful. You're Sisyphus changing the cat litter, and then sometimes it works the other way. Those moments become special because they enable you to see yourself in a special way. Your present self can get a good look at the past self who you were the last time this happened, and you get to think about how much you've changed and how little the world has. So yes, consider how things which were once meaningful to your characters might lose their shine, and who they become when they lose a desire, a passion, a love for something in life. Let them find new meaning and see how that changes them. Or you can use the static, unchanging characters around them to contrast them across the story to show how far they've come and how different they truly are. It's tempting to paint Flowey and Monica as fables of people who gave in to their worst instincts, who failed the test of the time loop, but I think it's better to look at them as examples of how essential human connection is, not only to our sense of meaning, but to remaining human itself. David Mitchell plays on an old phrase in Cloud Atlas when he writes, "To be is to be perceived." That, in some sense, parts of us live in the people around us, and so parts of us die when we don't have them around us too. This is why isolation is a common theme and character conflict in time loop stories, not just in the sense of being the only one who sees the world as it is, but that nobody will see you the way you see yourself. Your struggles become invisible. You know that scene in Edge of Tomorrow where Cruz takes Emily Blunt to that farmhouse in the countryside? A lot of people have talked about this, and he has that pained expression on his face because he's falling in love with her and she could never possibly understand the depth of that attachment because she's only known him for like a day. The intimacy of watching someone die can never be understated, not just seeing them in their most vulnerable but terminal moment, and she will never know. Your characters can struggle with things like, is it even worth trying for human connection, knowing that inevitably it's gonna be gone? And I think we all know what it's like to feel like others don't really understand our true internal selves, to want human connection and not really be able to find it. That's a complex, fascinating internal conflict to give your characters, and it can even go beyond the loop, because they escape it, and there is this whole other experience that nobody else is going to be able to fully understand usually. To some extent, they didn't even exist in the same world. We don't usually get to see how characters handle these feelings because the story is usually over by that point. But Marisha Pessl describes that feeling beautifully in Neverworld Wakes. Time no longer ran in a straight line for me. Instead, now and then, it looped and lost its balance. An hour would pass in the blink of an eye. I shouldn't have lived. I was never the good one. I saw very little as it truly was. We swear we see each other, but all we are ever able to make out is a tiny porthole view of an ocean. We think we remember the past as it was, but our memories are as fantastic and flimsy as dreams. There's the sense of disconnection, that we only ever perceive each other through a tiny porthole of reality. How does your character handle those feelings, and how does it play into their positive and negative arc, resisting that urge to do the bad thing or do the good thing? Especially because in some ways, even outside the time loop, we still only perceive a small part of each other. We're never going to be able to perceive other people as deeply as we perceive ourselves. And you can use all of this, that character struggle, to create some really fascinating plot dilemmas. Like in Edge of Tomorrow, Cage begs Vitaski to stay in the farmhouse, to stay safe so he can go alone and she won't die, knowing it'll be harder to stop the aliens without her, but harder to live on alone if she dies on the journey forward, as he surely knows she would. One truly painful thing to do is to give them a loop where they finally get what they want or need, but make it incompatible with leaving the loop. Maybe they can just never get it right again, or maybe the loop ending means that that reality doesn't continue on. Deprive them of that catharsis and explore what it means to live with that sense of isolation. Consider giving them one-sided relationships or experiences which always to some degree go on unfulfilled, and ask how they deal with that sense of isolation. This is also why some time loop stories trap someone in the time loop with them, to explore how vital that human connection is. Grossman even compares finding someone in a time loop with falling in love, that it's like discovering, quote, that one other person who understands what no one else seems to, which is the world is broken and can never ever be fixed. These stories allow us to ask, have you ever truly been perceived by someone else? And what does that mean for you? This video is brought to you by... brought to you by Skillshare, which I've been using to learn about Notion, Ali Abdal's class, where I get to learn how to organize my personal life, my writing, my work. Also, I don't waste so much time on my phone, and I would recommend trying to learn how to do that. And the first 500 people can try it for free, completely free, if you use my link down in the description below. Onto the video. None of this is real. This video is brought to Skillshare class on... I've said this. This video is...
He's close.
Hey, welcome to the video. Time loops do something very specific that basically no other narrative device does. They insulate our characters from the past and the future while also trapping them in the present. With some exceptions. There are some time loops which work weirdly.
Wibbly wobbly, timey-wimey.
But how a writer gets their character to approach this quirk of their new reality can tell us a lot about them. It can give them interesting conflicts and the story interesting themes. Palm Springs is a 2020 comedy film which sees Andy Samberg as Niles, who sees this time loop he's trapped in as a safe cocoon. He's lived this day over and over and over for who knows how long by now. His girlfriend is cheating on him on repeat, but he now treats this whole thing as kind of a meaningless discretion. He's seen it a million times before. Sarah, on the other hand, wakes up every morning after sleeping with her sister's husband on the night of their wedding. She wakes up with all the guilt and regret which comes with that every single day. It's not a safe cocoon for her. Niles is insulated from the future consequences of his pain, where Sarah is imprisoned by her present mistakes. Where Niles' story shows us the importance of moving forward, of confronting the future, that we can't just numb ourselves to our pain, Sarah's story reminds us that, to some degree, we always carry our mistakes with us in a way, that every day is made of the past, and we can only build on it to become a better person in the future. Because let me ask you a question. Have you ever felt trapped in your own emotions? Those times just as your brain begins to wake up and pieces the world together, sorts out dreams from reality, the first thing you feel is that pain, or that guilt, or that longing, that missed opportunity, that numbness. It's the first part of you to exist, and in a sense, feels like the most real part of you. The rest of us is just trailing along, and it can feel like Sarah's time loop. Sure, some details of the day might change, but the biggest things, the things which matter, which define how we end up seeing ourselves in the world, don't. Grief can feel a little bit like that. In an episode of Doctor Who called Heaven Sent, the Doctor is trapped in a time loop right after he loses his closest friends, and he says an interesting line.
It's funny. The day you lose someone isn't the worst. At least you've got something to do. It's all the days. They stay dead.
So don't just think about the mechanics of escaping the loop, consider the character's relationship with the past, the present, and the future. Is there something they're longing for outside the loop, or something that they might be afraid to confront, that escaping would mean they have to face? You can make the story more interesting just by complicating their reasons for escaping the loop. It's because of this weird quirk of time, these stories allow us to ask what it means to hold on to the past, whether that's a good thing, and more importantly, how we move forward into the future. How do we escape our own emotions, which might make us feel trapped in the single moment of our lives? You know how when you're a kid and you have your first breakup and it's the biggest thing in the world and you feel like the world will never be any different and nothing will ever be the same, it's just the same day over and over, and then one day you move on. It's kind of like that. How do we escape ourselves and move forward to become someone else? This video is, never mind. Perhaps the darkest kind of time loop isn't about the people trapped in it at all. It's about the people who put them there. There's just no escaping the perpetual state of sameness because every aspect of it invades your space and overloads your senses. Inside isn't so much a physical battle as it is a mental one. It's the little things that begin to chip away at your humanity and take a toll on your psyche. And the more you survey your surroundings, the more perplexed you become. What is this bizarre place? None of us are living. We're merely existing, completely devoid of optimism. I sure hope I can make it out of this room without doors before this happens to me. I hope we all make it out of this room. You would be forgiven for thinking that's a quote from a fantastic time loop book. It's not. No, this is from an article by Jair Smith-Pennock, who argues the worst thing about prison wasn't the violence, but the monotony. The boredom, the isolation, and frankly, the nihilism and dehumanization that comes with that. The parallels are uncanny. Prison is a deeply psychological place. It's designed to be so. So let me ask you a question. Is the repetition built into that life just or cruel? There's an episode of Black Mirror called White Bear, where a woman convicted of kidnapping and filming the murder of a child is basically tortured with a time loop over and over. Every day she wakes up to find herself in a hostile world where people stare and laugh at her before she's paraded through the streets and humiliated. Then, at the end of the day, her memory is wiped to do it all over again tomorrow. But the episode isn't really about the woman so much as it is about the people who designed this time loop for her. Because in the final act of the episode, we see the public is invited to play roles as actors in this time loop, all to watch her misery and torture. Worse, they're told to go in, take pictures, to have fun. It's a tourist attraction. The time loop here is about voyeuristic justice. Does the punishment fit the crime? Do we have a justice system which, like a good time loop, is built to help people change and emerge better people on the other side? Or have we built one to satisfy a sadistic desire for vengeance and retribution, with repetition part of that torture and urge? The satisfaction society can get from seeing someone punished, from reducing their humanity. The time loop isn't just about what it means to be trapped in it, but who we trap in it, why, and what that says about us. The kind of loop that just keeps someone having to do the same thing day in, day out, over and 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 over. Let's loop all of this together in a summary. Time loops test your characters to their limits, revealing who they truly are by giving them infinite time and no consequences. 2. Use the time loop to explore their wants and needs from different angles. 3. Time loops can be used to explore nihilism and the horror of a meaningless existence, but they can also be about how we find meaning and resisting that. 4. Consider giving your characters moments where they recognize the ordinary beauty of the everyday that they wouldn't otherwise see. 5. Consider how your character goes on with living a life not seen by others. What does the lack of human connection do to them? 6. Time loops can be used as prisons, exploring concepts like justice, fairness, and commenting on the people who might have put them there. My job means I have to teach myself new skills all the time. I've had to teach myself Premiere, Photoshop, marketing. The latest is Notion to help me organize my life, the people working with me, my writing, everything. If you don't learn, you don't grow. And I wouldn't be able to get as far as I have without Skillshare. But you will know what you want to learn far better than I will. It can be YouTube, illustration, design, anything. Skillshare has classes on it to help you. And I know you're a creative person because you're watching this video. So here's what I say. Try it out for yourself. The first 500 people who use my link down in the description can try it completely for free. All you have to do is click the link and then I get out. And then I get out. Oh, I remember it all. All the hundreds, the thousands of times, and all you have to do is click the link. Click the link. Click the link. Click the link.
One more time.
This video is brought to you by